Thanks, John. Yeah, I'm Marcella. I work in the central office. I support the legal team and the planning team in the central office. And I'm excited to talk to you about Scamper today, which is a brainstorming tool. And I think you may find some, if you were at yesterday's presentation, Jamie talked about the Lotus Blossom. I think you'll find some similarities, but hopefully just enough difference to kind of work, a tool into sort of unique situations. So what is Scamper? It is an acronym, of course, and it is a tool to help you generate new ideas by responding to a how might we question by looking at like a series of topics, and that's what Scamper stands for. So you can see here on the screen what each letter stands for, and essentially we'll look at the how might we question within kind of through each lens, substituting or changing out parts of the process, combining parts of the process to eliminate waste, adapting parts of the process to serve a different purpose, modifying, just changing the process, putting parts of the process to another use or putting the product to another use, eliminating parts of the parts of the process or the entire process altogether, and reversing parts of the process. And this, when you first start to read about it, it definitely has a sort of manufacturer or product-based lean to it, but you can adapt these questions to your situation. And I'm going to go through an example a little bit later, and we were able to do that pretty successfully. It takes a little bit of creative thinking, but it does work. All right, when to use it. When you need to brainstorm something, when you need fresh creative ideas, when you want to solve an existing problem that you know exists or a process that you know isn't working as well as it could, and you want to think about how you might be able to make improvements to that process, or considering new ways to innovate. So maybe a process doesn't exist or a product doesn't exist, but you have an idea that one could, and you want to think about ways to make that happen. And it's also helpful for disrupting old patterns or ways of thinking or groupthink. And that's, I think, especially helpful. And we saw this in the example that I'll talk about. When you work with the same group of folks at the agency on a process, a business process, year in and year out, some of the same kind of old patterns of thinking and doing can show up. And so this tool provides, and so many of the tools in Lean, provides just enough structure to sort of force a different way or a new way of thinking so that you can kind of bust out of those old patterns and come up with something new. So it was pretty accessible tool, I think. You can do it in person or virtual. I'll show you an example of what the tool looks like in just a moment, but for in person, I think you'd need a big space, a big whiteboard or chalkboard or wall that you could put sticky notes on. And if you're doing it virtually, which we did, the one that I did was this past summer, we did it all virtually. A virtual whiteboard space is really important, and I'll show you the example of that. This is a group exercise, although I suppose you could do it as an individual, but you could do it with a good sized group, or you could do it with just a couple of people. Our group was sort of mid-size. I think there was eight or so folks. And it worked pretty well. You just would need to think about, the time constraints that you have. The more people, the more time it's probably going to take. So a few tips. Definitely, this one requires a little bit of preparation. You have one how might we question to brainstorm around. And sometimes you don't necessarily know exactly what that how might we question is when you start. And so you may need to do a little bit of legwork at the beginning to make sure you know and you have consensus on that how might we question so that you're brainstorming about the same, everybody's on the same page for the brainstorming. And then I would recommend looking over those Scamper questions beforehand and basically adjusting the language a little bit to fit your questions. And we did this as well because again, they're a little bit skewed towards a product or sort of assembly line process, manufacturing process. And so having those questions tweaked a little bit before you go in to facilitate can help just save the group a little bit of confusion, and, you know, just get them started a little bit quicker. And one tip from the field is for each of the categories that you're going to look at, I would recommend, and we did this, starting with a minute or a couple of minutes, depending on how much time you have, of silent individual work before you go into the group discussion. And that this sort of technique you can use in all kinds of facilitation ways, but it allows folks who maybe aren't as comfortable jumping in to speak, or are a little slower processing, or want to think about things for a little bit silently. It allows them space to do that. And so you can, start each section with a minute or 3 of silent work, and then you jump into the group discussion. And then this tool really, it pairs, and I think a lot of brainstorming tools pair really well with other lean tools. And part of that is because brainstorming is sort of by definition going to get you all kinds of ideas. And it can be kind of overwhelming about, if one idea doesn't like leap out at the group of like, yes, that is the idea we want to go with, which I think doesn't always happen. It can be a little bit overwhelming to look at this slate of 50 ideas that you've just generated and decide where is the best place to start. So John's going to talk about the impact effort analysis after this presentation, and that is a really helpful one to sort of take you out on the back end of a brainstorming exercise. And to start, I mentioned before, you have to have that one how might we question. And so you may need to do a little bit of problem definition before you start the brainstorming activity. And so 5 whys or fishbone, which are those problem definition exercises, those can be really helpful in sort of defining the how might we question. All right, so now I'm going to show you the online tool that we used with a group at the agency. Have anyone used Miro before? I feel like at this point, a few folks have probably used Miro. It seems it's a pretty cool tool. It's an online platform. You can set up an account for free as long as you stay within a certain number of boards. And what it lets you do is set up these virtual board spaces, and then you can share the link with however many folks in your group, and everyone can access this board and kind of work together on the screen. And so the way we did it was, not approved by the state. We used it. I've used it in a couple of different scenarios for state-related work, but so anyways, we can put this up on the board. The way we did it was we had one person kind of scribing and showing their screen, but everyone had the access on their own computer and could get in there and use it. And a cool thing about Miro is that it actually has a template for Scamper, which you're looking at right now. So you can see that in the middle where it says subject, that's where you would put your how might we question. And then you can walk around. It starts here with substitute, Scamper, around the circle, and use these sticky notes to write out your ideas. And so what we did for the group that we worked with in Forest Parks and Rec, they had this long-standing process that involved a lot of different people and programs. It was always a pain to deal with every year, and they really needed just like a fresh influx of ideas on how to make this process better. And so we brought everyone together virtually. We had about 2 hours. We used about a quarter of that time to walk through a 5 whys because we didn't have consensus on exactly what how might we question we wanted to look at in the Scamper. I think there could have been multiple how might we questions, but we had to pick one. And we did that. We put that in the middle, and then we walked around each piece. And so for each piece, what we did was just kind of zoom in and say, okay, how might we substitute parts of the process or people or activities that we're doing in this process to make it better? And then we brainstorm. And so what we ended up with is this chart here. There's like close to 60 ideas on this chart. you can see substitute, like we started here and we got a bunch of ideas and then it sort of peters off as you go around the circle. You might start to see ideas recurring. They fit in different categories. But yeah, we came up with, this was a couple of hours worth of work, good discussion. And after this, we did an impact effort matrix so that they could try to think about what they wanted to prioritize for their next steps. And then I've got a link that I'll put in the chat of a few, like some videos and extra discussion about the tool that's helpful. I found helpful, John shared with me. And of course, I do want to give credit to my co-facilitator on this one was John Zajkowski, who's always great to work with.
And what's remarkable about the volume of ideas that's presented here is this was in a space where they thought they had picked over it. They had gone over the topic over many years with multiple brainstorming exercises. They thought that they had cleared the space of every idea worth having. And what's powerful about the Scamper is that it allows them to think in new, different ways. And you can see how many ideas they came up with, even in that space.
John, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks, Marcella. The only one thing I'll add on too is, yeah, given the sheer volume of ideas, we also added in a affinity diagram exercise after we completed this, because as Marcella indicated, there were recurring themes for ideas, so we decided to try and regroup them, and we came up with a smaller number of kind of common themes across the ideas, and then launched into the impact effort. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. So this was just, so basically in Miro, it allows you to save a copy of that initial brainstorm that you did. You can duplicate the page, and then we started to just like we deleted all the pieces, all the structure from the Scamper, and then squish them all together in these sort of themed buckets, as John was saying. And then from there, we added our impact effort designations. Any other questions?
Right. Yeah, we got a couple minutes for questions. Go ahead and raise your hands. Okay. If there are no questions, we can move on. Thank you so much, Marcella.